Welcome to Raising the Bar Agronomy Edition, a 1-hour video conference by and for soil and crop scientists who are preparing online coursework and who want to benefit from, in addition to the expertise available from Global Campus and Teaching and Learning Center colleagues, expertise developed within the discipline of agronomy itself. I am Steve Dandino, Associate Provost at Colorado State University and Executive Director of the Reinvention Collaborative. On behalf of the RC's Research University members, I want to thank today's distinguished presenter, Dr. Deana Namuth-Covert, Professor and Director of Online Education and Outreach in the College of Food, Agricultural, and Environmental Sciences at The Ohio State University, and Dr. Matthew Wallenstein, Professor and Head, and his colleagues in the Colorado State University Department of Soil and Crop Science. We're really grateful to all of you for coming together to help us in this effort. Matt, would you care to add to these words of introduction?
Sure. Thanks, Steve, and thanks so much for organizing this. It's really exciting to have this webinar today. We're recording this in the middle of the COVID epidemic, and a lot of us have been adapting really quickly to new modes of instruction. So it couldn't be more timely. The evolution of agronomy education seems to take place in a punctuated evolution. And I think there's no doubt that we're on the precipice of another period of rapid adaptation and change and evolution, which will be really exciting. And so we're really delighted today to have one of the global experts in the field of online agronomy education, Dr. Deana Namuth-Covert. She has over 2 decades of experience in distance learning, going back before we really were thinking about online learning. First as a program director of distance education at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln, and more recently at the Ohio State University College of Food, Agricultural, and Environmental Sciences, where she directs online education and outreach. It's really a pleasure to have you here, Deana, and thanks so much for joining us.
All right, well, thanks, you guys. When you say 20 years, that makes me feel really old. But yeah, I have, I'm going to start sharing my screen here. But that brings back memories when we were first starting distance ed. We were actually mailing out big VCR tapes. So that's what it was like back in the day. All right, let me move my video pod around and get to the screen share. There we go. All right, so first thing I want to pop up here, you guys, and thanks for the introduction. I want to also thank all of you for attending. I know you're exhausted. It's been a super long semester and you're trying to get out there and get out to the field too. So I really appreciate it. And for those of you who haven't been able to join us live, really happy you're able to look at the recording as well. So hopefully we'll answer a lot of your questions. So I don't want to assume that you all know how to use Zoom. So just in case this is kind of new to you, I have a screen capture here. What you'll see on the bottom bar is you'll see a microphone with a mute sign. So if you want to like interrupt me or ask a question, you can just click on your mic. Or the other thing you can do is also go to the chat box. So the little icon that's there, and you can type in your question there. So kind of what I'm going to do, I've got 5 different things that are like the top 5 that I've kind of seen that I've tried in my classes, as well as with faculty I've worked with over the years. And instead of just saving discussion time for the end, we're going to kind of break as we go along, and then we can talk about each area as we go through there. And again, if you have things that come to mind or a question, feel free to interrupt or at least through the chat box. I'll keep an eye on that too. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I am going to try out this polling question. So Liz got this all lined up for me ahead of time, so thank you so much. So I think you will all now see on your screen a reflection question number 1, and I want you just to focus on the first one, not the other 4 questions. We'll go through them a little bit later. So I want to kind of get a sense of where you are at, and especially coming off of the semester. So which of those 5 items describe you the best? So as far as how much your experience is with using educational technology. So the first one, the whiteboard at the front of the room with markers is technology, right? How about the projector system? The second one, I use a bit of technology in my on-campus classes like iPads, YouTube videos, a polling system like iClickers, Top Hat, maybe use Canvas. The third one, COVID ate my lunch. I made it through, but oi, what a nightmare. Help, Deana. Does that describe you? The next one, I've already been teaching online in some fashion, and I'm comfortable with the basics, and you're ready to go to the next stage. Or the last one, you're a pro at this. You love using technology, and you're just looking for some fresh ideas. So go ahead and take a second and just click on which of those kind of describes you the most. I'll give you a second, and then once I see someone kind of come in here, we'll go ahead and end the poll, and we'll see what it looks like. So again, you're going to see reflection question 2, 3, and 4, but we'll do those in a little bit. Okay, so it looks like only 2 of you have maybe answered in, if I'm looking at this right. So go ahead, see if you can figure out. I think you can just click on one of those and it'll register for you. And I'll just wait a second here to see if a couple more have come in. Okay, I see a chat box question. Let's see what we got here. Not able to submit. Okay. Liz, any idea why that might be? We've got 3 people that can't submit.
No, I'm not sure why that would be.
Okay. Well, let me. Oh, you have to answer all the questions. Okay, thanks, Steve. So go ahead and scroll through 2, 3, and 4 and just pick something and then hit submit. And we'll come back to it, unless you want to look at those. Well, yeah, go ahead, I guess, look at them, and we'll kind of explore them when I get to that part of the talk. So the second question is, what level of class are you teaching? Introductory undergrads, advanced undergrads, graduate students? Are you doing both undergrad and grad level? Are you doing extension and outreach? And then are you doing kind of a combo? And again, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but go ahead and answer it now, that's fine. And then I'm curious as to what describes your style or the way your courses are currently designed. Are they mostly lecture-based? Are they both lecture and labs? Or are you very hands-on with very little lecturing? So if you have a lot of extension appointment, you probably would be more in that area. And any answer is fine. The fourth one is then, what is your time kind of looking like? So do you have plenty of time and resources to pull off a good online course, which of course we all want you to say, but we know that's not probably reality. The second one, are you stretched really thin? You have a lot of competing priorities and you're freaking out just thinking about what the heck the fall is going to bring. And then the third one is, are you kind of somewhere in the middle of that? And when we get towards the end of all of this, I'm going to give you some ideas on how you might be able to multitask a little bit. So yeah, go ahead and fill out all of those, and then we'll go ahead and end the polling. Thanks you guys for figuring out why we were getting stuck there. It looks like we have 10 people have responded, and we've got 16 participants. 4 of us or so are probably not going to answer. All right, just for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and end the polling, okay? So no offense if you didn't actually get your results in there. So let me share results. Now I think you guys can see this now, is that right? So can you see on question number 1, where it looks like 70% of the people say you're using a little bit of technology in your class, and then the other 30 say you've already been teaching some online. So actually this is great. We don't have anybody super freaking out. Love it. So that might mean you might have hard questions for me. All right, so let me go ahead and go forward to the next slide. Oops. Okay, so my top 5 things, I actually kind of rephrased it a little bit. So these are ideas on how to move the ATM out of the bank, and I'll explain to you what that means. So the 5 ways I kind of broke this down was learning goals should drive our technology choices. We'll talk about that in a second. We're going to explore opportunities that technology offers us. The third one, embrace move cheese moments. I'll talk a little bit about that. Fourth one, connecting with students. And then the 5th one is repurposing for multiple applications. Okay, so let me go ahead and dive in. So this first one, we won't have much discussion. This is just more I wanted to share what I've learned along the ways. This is Dr. Ashu Guru, and yes, his last name really is Guru. So I worked with him early in my career. He's a computer programmer, but before he was doing that, he was also a high school teacher. So he helped us way before Canvas or Blackboard or any WebCT or any of those learning management systems were even together. So we actually developed our own. And it was really important. And so what's really important is you don't want to be thinking about how can I use a tool in my class? It's better to flip that around and think, what is it you're wanting to teach the students? And it may not just be content, it may be some sort of like soft skill, like problem solving or something like that. So think about that first. And then what you, in an ideal world, if you had all the money in the world, you know, what would that look like? And then go pick the tool that best fits that. So that way you're not chasing tools. There's always going to be a new one out there, and it may or may not provide a better service than what you currently have. So when I do this, I'm going through that kind of exercise. The other thing I will do now that we have more technology support on our campuses is go to our IT specialists, right, that you may have access to, and just find out, they can tell you what are the institutional supported tools. The reason why I like to use those, if it can help, is then you also have the IT help folks, right? So if something crashes on you, they're familiar with the tool and they can help you out. The other thing is typically your institution has made sure that that tool is data secure, that you're not putting your students at risk for any data kind of breaches. And they've also looked at intellectual property. So some of these companies can be tricky where you have all of your course content on their system, but you may unintentionally have given them rights to use all of your content and repackage it and resell it. So not that that can be an okay thing, right? There could be a good agreement you could have with a company. You just don't want them to be making $1 million and you don't get anything out of it. So you want to make sure it's kind of a win-win kind of deal there. So those are two things that I learned early on. Just be careful of those, okay? All right, so the ATM machine deal. All right, so when I was first starting my career 20-some years ago, I went to a distance ed conference, and Dr. Carol Twigg was one of the speakers there. And she gave us this analogy saying you need to move the ATM machine out of the bank. So what happened is when ATM machines were first invented, they actually put them inside of banks. So let's think about this, right? So that means you can only get to the ATM machine to get your cash out during business hours, right? Because it's inside of the bank. And so if you were going to go to the bank during normal business hours, you're probably just going to go talk to the live teller over here, right? Why would you go to a box over here? But then somebody had the brilliant idea of moving it out, right? So you move the ATM machine outside so you can drive by on your car 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to get your cash. Or my favorite one I found on the web is this one, right? This is like a portable ATM machine, probably for like an auction kind of thing. So that kind of idea, and now we see them everywhere, right? So they're in airports, shopping malls, everywhere you want to go. And so that is when the technology of the ATM machine was fully utilized, or more fully utilized. And then as I was putting this together, I realized even that analogy is a little dated, right? Because we've actually gone beyond the ATM machine a little bit now too, where we're doing a lot of this contactless paying, even more so now, you know, so now we're using our cell phones to just kind of slide. But again, we're moving it out of where it was originally put. Okay, so let's put that in context with our teaching, right? So this is what we typically do. I am guilty, I do this too, even with all my experience of online. I'll go where we have a typical scenario where you've got, maybe it's not a huge lecture hall like this, maybe you do just have 20 students sitting out here, but it's typically the expert at the front of the room on the stage, spewing out all kinds of wonderful insights and inspiring these great students. So we typically, when we go online, do the same thing, right? So what do? We record our PowerPoint, where it's just still the one speaker coming out at students in a one-directional kind of manner. And now our students are just sitting here wherever they're at. They may be in their pajamas on their couches, but it's still information going one way instead of a dialogue or even interaction among the participants. So we haven't really fully utilized the power of the technology. We're really just kind of putting it on top of our normal kind of system or pattern. Okay, so this is kind of, I don't know if this is a great quote yet or not, but this is my thinking. So to me, online education or using technology is more than just putting classes online or making them available electronically. It's actually a culture change. So if we do this right, we have to stop and think about what is it we're really wanting these folks to learn? And is there a better way to do it than maybe in this format, which has worked for a long time, right? But that was before we had these other tools available. Okay, so this was my second question then, was to find out what you guys have done. So let me scroll here. Ooh, and I didn't even realize, I hope the poll sharing isn't in your way, that you guys are able to move that out of the way. Okay. For me, I hit it. Okay, so it looks like half of you teach both undergrad and grad level. And then our next comment is teaching advanced undergrads. Those are easier to do for online stuff. So that's good. And then we've got kind of a mix of undergrad, introductory level, and then we've got a little bit of extension. Okay. So then our next question was, what format are you guys using? So it looks like okay, most of you have both a lecture and a lab. That's awesome. That gives us a lot to work with. And then almost half of you are doing completely lecture-based. So I've got some ideas for you on that one. And then some of you, 10% of you, one of you, I guess, has a really hands-on kind of thing. I've still got some ideas for you on that one too. Okay, so let me hide this down. And let's go ahead and click forward. Okay, so for our lecture-based one, this is Brian Raisin, and I'm actually going to play a couple minutes of his talk. I could tell you what he's going to say, but I think it's going to be more powerful if you can hear it. So actually, let me stop sharing because I think I forgot to hit an important button. There we go. That will share the computer sound. So let me go ahead and click on the YouTube video. And you guys should be able to hear this.
Okay, everybody, we're going to start at the end. Let's just jump straight to the quiz and ask you two questions. First one, have you ever had a deadly boring professor? So think like I'd rather be sleeping, maybe not permanently in a cemetery, but just torturous, monotone lecture, absolutely putting you to sleep. Maybe it was back when you were an undergrad, maybe it was last week at an academic conference. Anyway, kind of picture that in your mind. Now let me ask you the serious question. Is that professor you? Okay, sorry, it's a little bit harsh. Let me just jump straight ahead. I'm also asking the question, is that professor me? I'm Brian Raisin. I've been hanging around with Ohio State for about 20 years, just over that now, mostly with the Department of Extension, working statewide in leadership, but also have a 20% appointment now teaching in ag communications, education, and leadership. Well, this past fall, the Faculty Council, I've been on that for a couple of years, and we kind of had this agenda item about using technology, in particular MediaSite, on how we can improve our teaching, and particularly teaching with distance and maybe flipped classrooms, things like that. So I don't remember if I volunteered or if I got volunteered, but somehow or another, I also had this personal goal of improving my own teaching. And so lo and behold, I said, well, let me take a stab at putting something together. Now at that same time, I was actually using MediaSite to teach a graduate level leadership class. And I kind of had that moment of just, this is insane. I'm leading a course on leadership, and I've got these master's and PhD students who are watching me. And I thought, man, I better get it right. What can I do to improve my teaching and not make my students wish they were 6 feet under? No disrespect here, but to illustrate the point, you've probably been in that lecture. So fast forward, what was the premise? Well, the Faculty Council said, hey, distance learning options are growing. We're seeing more and more of them. Flipped classrooms are providing more in-depth learning opportunities. And so MediaSite, Camtasia, CamRelay, things like that are available. Well, my premise, along with those, was that some of our online lectures are like slow poison. They're absolutely killing our students while we talk. I was at a distance learning workshop, and they said, you can use the studio and have a desk and the cameras and all this good stuff and sit there and deliver your lecture. And I was like, dear heaven, no. Do you want to? It's just not the right thing to do. So what I do, put together a couple of ideas on how you might improve your lectures. So my remedy, 2 simple points if you remember nothing else. First one, get outside. And the second one, stand up. Don't deliver your lectures sitting down at the desk. Move around, do something to make it interactive and to get your students' attention. You may see people talking about getting the fancy cameras and the umbrellas and the lighting kits and all that sort of thing. You don't need to do that. I'm recording this using the media site, using the camera built into my laptop right now, and it's not bad. No, it's not this perfect quality, but you know what? It can be engaging, and depending on what you're teaching, you can be out in the field recording your lecture, making it really real and meaningful. So with that premise and background,
Okay, so I'm going to stop Brian there because he goes on for another 11 minutes or so, and he gives some really good tips as well. So if you're thinking you would like to kind of keep the lecture mode of sorts, I'll go ahead and make sure we get you this link because he's got some really good ideas. He would do stuff like he'd be talking about mentoring or coaching. So he'd give his talk from the football stadium, right? So for us, for agronomy, I'm thinking, oh, wow, we've got all kinds of opportunity, right? Just take your laptop out or your iPad out with you when you're doing research this summer, because you can be doing some short little clips out there, or you can be showing the students some of the research you're doing to record and show that later. Now you may be thinking too, okay, yeah, but it's COVID. What if I'm stuck at home? What can I do there? So this is Jim Ippolito, who most of you probably know, and he said I could share this with you guys. So let me go ahead and show what he did.
Hi, SOCR 350 students. I hope you're enjoying your COVID-19 break. Hey, before we start on the lectures, I want to go back and revisit this experiment that we set up in the classroom 8 days ago. We took 100 grams of soil, saturated it, and put 10 grams of urea fertilizer on the top and closed the lid. And then we put 100 grams of soil, saturated it into this container, and we added, it's hard to read, but it's Nutrisphere N. It has a urease inhibitor built into it. And they've been capped for a week. We opened them 2 days after we set this up in the classroom. We opened them in the classroom, nothing, no volatilization. The concept is this, that this is going to volatilize over time, and this should reduce volatilization. And it's too bad I don't have an ammonia measuring meter, but I don't. But let's open this one and take a look at my expression on my face, and then we'll open this one and we'll take a look at the expression on my face as well. And then we'll do an experiment with my dog. Haha. Okay, so here we go. 8 days after setting this up, has volatilization occurred? Oh yeah, it's occurred. All right, I can't tell you how much, but it smells like ammonia. Let's open up the Nutrisphere N. Has volatilization occurred? Oh, mama. Yep, that's pretty bad. So, even though Nutrisphere N contains a urease inhibitor, it didn't really work very well. And sometimes you see that in the literature, that the Nutrisphere N is supposed to reduce ammonia volatilization because it has a urease inhibitor. But in the case of our little study or experiment, it did not. So, let's do this. I'm going to take this. Follow me. I'm going to take the Nutrisphere N. Let's see what my dog does. All right. Give me a second. While I open this up, let's see if I can elicit a response out of my dog. All right. There's my dog, Kona. What do you think of this? What do you think? Oh, somebody doesn't like that. Oh, what do you think? Yeah, go figure. It stinks.
So there's a couple of ways that you can do some, oops, let me get this to stop here, there we are. Where you can do some kind of creativity with the lectures, right? So now you may be thinking, okay, that's great, Deana, but I'm not as crazy as those two guys, right? And that's okay too. That's the other thing I was gonna say is kind of play to your strengths as well. Okay, and I see a chat thing here. Let me see if it's something I should address. That was great. Yeah, okay. You guys are commenting about the Ippolito meter too. Yep, that's awesome. So here's another approach, right? So Maria, I'm going to put her on the spot a little bit. So this year when she went into COVID, what she typically does if she's getting ready for her lectures is she tends to write out a little more in detail what she was going to do. So as she was doing her course, instead of then doing the extra step of recording, then she added those notes to her PowerPoint slides. And then keep this in mind because I'm going to show you about an ebook. So Maria is actually just one step away now from making an ebook if she wants to do that. And that's another resource for the students. But when you look here at what she has in the text, she's again very personable, right? Here we are, class. So this is what makes her different from just going to Khan Academy type of thing. All right, let me check the chat box. Nice engaging way for students to demonstrate concepts. Yeah, right. So I love the creativity in that. Now, the other thing, what you'll want to do is, if you guys did do some recording this semester, is go back and look at the data. See if your students really did click on the lectures or the videos or not. So in my experience with my students who were freshmen, sophomores, they weren't watching my videos, which was really bumming me out. But I have a solution for you on that. Now, they maybe were watching yours, or if you're crazy like Jim and Brian, you know, then maybe they were more engaged. Or maybe if you need to do is just take segments of that. But we'll talk about that here in a second. Okay, let me shut the chat down here. Okay, so the other thing, and then we're going to break for some discussion time, is you don't have to do all the work either, right? You can flip it around and have your students do some of the things as well. So this is an example that I've done at Ohio State. I worked with one of my colleagues who is a soil fertility type of person teaching a freshman level course, and another one of my former students who is an instructor at Northeast Community College in Nebraska. Two different states, right? But that's what we can do with technology. We can bring them together. So both of the groups of students did the exact same experiment on a little bit different field conditions, and then they shared their data. And then we also had a postdoc, Mao Huang, who worked with us to then she developed an online lesson manual based on this lab that they did together. And so what happened was the students at Northeast Community College really took the assignment and ran with it. They actually did presentations on their experiments that they did and shared them with the Ohio State students. And some of the students got pretty creative. You know, some of them would do the typical, put the iPad in front of them and then just talk from, you know, the classroom or their desks. But others of them went out into the field and gave their presentations. And the instructor at Northeast Community College loved this so much that he has kept this activity in for his class, even though they're not connecting with Ohio anymore, because he found that their communication skills really improved. It was just a good way for them to learn the content better. In other words, it was better than any lab he had done before because of the technology and the way they connected together. Okay, so let me pause. You guys have mics. I think you can unmute them. Let's just stop there and let's see, does anything pop to your mind of things you might be able to do for this fall, just in case COVID comes around again and you have to do everything online, or maybe you need to do it online anyway for some students who can't come to campus. So anything that comes to your mind or any questions that you have for me? And if not, then we'll go ahead and continue. I'm going to stop sharing here so it's a little bit easier to see the chat box. And I don't know if you guys can unmute at your end. If you're not able to, then you can just chat in the box and we can get you the mic access.
It looks like we can unmute. I have a question.
Okay.
So, well, I could even turn my video on, but one possibility is that we may be looking at hybrid approaches. So where we would utilize the classroom just part of the time. So kind of maybe presentations, and then so deliver some content online and then utilize less frequent classroom periods for other reasons. Any thoughts on how to take advantage of both of the different formats?
Yeah, actually, as we go on in my little talk here, I'll talk about that a little bit. So my scenario at Ohio State was when I was in a teaching role. So we would do the class live, right? So I live in Nebraska and I was telecommuting even before it was the thing to do, right? So I was teaching into Ohio State University in their classroom. And we got a great funding from the state of Ohio. So the classroom actually has microphones in the ceiling and you can do all that. So we'd have live lecture. The beauty of it, because I was remotely in, then anybody in the world could also log in to Zoom, right? And they could be attending during the live lecture part. Then for the students that were on campus, we had a live lab. So So there was a lab instructor on campus, and they would do a more traditional lab in the greenhouse out in the field kind of thing. We would also kind of write those assignments in a way that if someone was completely remote, they could go out to their own field or a local farmer field and do the same kind of experiments. So there's that scenario. Another scenario that I was part of at the University of Nebraska, our extension folks, they would be doing like 1 or 2 day workshops. And so what they did is they turned those into academic credit courses as well. So they would have both their non-credit extension people and any credit students together for the 1 or 2 day workshop, hands-on, doing all that kind of stuff. And then the students that were going to earn credit finish things up online. So they would have some exams, they'd be writing papers and some more interaction with people that way. And when I think about COVID, you know, I don't know. I mean, are you going to be looking at a scenario where maybe students just come to campus for the labs? You know, so do you have a thing where do you pack the labs so they take a day, but then they're done in a day? So they get like 2 or 4 labs done at one time. I'm not sure. So those are just a couple of things that kind of come to mind. One thing I would do, though, I think, is when you're thinking about hybrid, is, you know, I think it helps to make it to where if a student is going to be completely online, they could still participate and have that option. You know, maybe they're going to watch recordings instead of participate live, just in case you've got some students out there that can't log in live for some reason. Maybe there's only one computer in the house, and so they can't get to class till later. Anyway, other questions or thoughts that you guys have? And it looks like Matt is spellbound by my brilliant answer.
That's great, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? If not, I'll go ahead and continue on. Okay, seeing that, I'm going to go ahead. If you're in the middle of typing something, though, go ahead and keep typing. I'll see it, and I'll stop and see what your question is. This picture here, just to explain a little bit more, this was a grad student I had at the time when I was at the University of Nebraska. So she made this video. It was actually a genetics principle type of video. So they did like a green screen thing, just kind of like the weather girl. And we'd be pointing to the sky, but we would actually put in the Punnett square while she's in the field and talking about the traits that are being followed. So maybe keep that in mind too if you have some grad students this summer who are interested in education or outreach. This is a really good experience for them too, to put together just a small piece of material that you can use in your classes as well. All right, let's see if this will go forward for me. There we are. Okay, so moving the cheese moments. Okay, so if you have not read this book, Who Moved My Cheese, I highly recommend it. It's like a $5 book. Take you half an hour to read it, but it's especially now, I think, pretty appropriate. It's talking about when something unexpected happens, right? And you may or may not like it, and how do you adjust and work with it? So I want to share a couple of things that I've found as I've been just recently teaching at Ohio that were kind of some move cheese moments or desperation kind of moments, right? Okay, so one thing we want to do, or we can do with online stuff, is get away from just being the expert projecting out one way, right? So again, as I talked about, I was delivering into the classroom. Here's what the classroom looked like at Ohio. So this was one of the newly renovated ones. So nice camera view where I can see them. They can see me at the front. Then this is also a back camera. So if anyone's in the classroom in a normal kind of speaker, they can see to make sure that their video going out is working okay as well. And then with the microphones from the ceiling, then you can hear the students sometimes more than they realize that you can hear them. So, but it's good. But what's your first impression when you look here? What are you thinking? Like, I'm just curious as you guys see this. And I had probably about 40 students in my class.
The classroom is empty.
Right? I wonder how many of my colleagues would walk by, right, and see this classroom every day, and they're probably thinking, where are people at, right? Well, guess what? They were logging in from home, right? So they had that option. They could do that if they wanted to do that, or they were watching it, you know, later, because especially during planting and harvesting season, these students were very much needed in the field. It was a 2-year program where I was teaching into, so a lot of those students were needed back home to be farming. what's the other thing? The other thing, if you notice, some feedback I got is when someone would sit in my class and do some peer review, they're like, oh, the students were on their computers all the time or they're on their phone. Well, guess what? I was using the polling stuff and I was having the students log in, and so they would see the slides live there. They could interact with polling, they could chat with me. It turned out the students would do chat more than they would use the mic. I think it was just too weird otherwise, but right. So what the reason why I put this up too is sometimes I think we have the same expectation of our classrooms online as what we do in person, right? So normally we would think an empty classroom means the instructor is really bad and they're not engaging with the students, when in reality we are. It's just a different kind of mode. And sometimes it's kind of hard as an instructor because it's a lot easier to engage with the full classroom, right? So you have to know to look in the chat box more and watch the video screens and that kind of thing. All right, so our move cheese moment in this case, whoops, was this guy showed up. Okay, so in our greenhouses, there's teaching greenhouse, and we would have the students plant some corn and soybeans, and they'd kind of watch it throughout the semester, and we ask various questions. Well, for like 2 or 3 years in a row, these guys were eating the corn and soybean seeds, right? So it was really frustrating for the lab instructor because a lot of times experiments just would fail because this critter was eating them. So out of desperation, we're like, well, let's just have the kids do this at home, because we were already mailing out seeds to the distance students and they were having a great experience. So we did it out of desperation. And then this is what we started getting. Students started emailing us pictures of their, their seeds that were starting to germinate, and we would have them plant them, and they started getting creative. They started coming up with their own experiments to do, put them in the dark, put them in, different light or whatever. So bottom line, the lab instructor never turned back. After that point forward, he had the on-campus students always doing this at home because they were far more engaged with it. For some reason, walking across the lot to the greenhouse to check on their stuff every day was too much for them. But if they had it right there in their own apartment, they were watching it, and we were getting all kinds of engagement. It was fun. We had one student who was telling us that at home, towards the end of the semester, his soybeans were starting to have some seed pods. We're like, right, sure they are. So he was home one time and logged in, and we're like, hey, while you're home, show us your plants. Well, this is what he got to grow, right? This is his corn plant. And then here's his soybeans, right? And then sure enough, here's the seed pods. So it turned out he had bought this grow light. It was putting all kinds of fertilizer on it and all that. It was awesome. It was the most incredible teaching opportunity, right? And it wouldn't have been possible had we thought in an old traditional way. And then because of the technology, we were able to see, and all the other students, what each student was doing at home. So it was really kind of cool. All right, so let me stop there. So are you thinking of, or did you have something that happened this semester? It was just like pure desperation and you just had to wing it and it actually turned out to be good? Any kind of cool ideas there that maybe other folks might like to hear about? Now let me go ahead and stop sharing because then we can see that I can see the chat box better. All right, so Megan says she's been challenged thinking about how much I can ask of students to do from home in terms of germinating seeds, etc. What has been your experience? Yeah, that hasn't been a problem at all, right? So a couple things you could do. Either, well, okay, maybe 3 things. So you could mail the seeds out, which is kind of a pain in the rear, especially if you have a lot of students. Or you could make packets available for them. So if you're doing the hybrid thing and the students are going to be on campus, or most of them, they can just pick it up and take it home. Or you can just use common stuff, right, that they can find from the garden center or their local seed kind of dealer. So the other thing too you can think about is if the students are only going to be at home, how can you connect them in with their community? That's the other benefit of this, right? So maybe they know the folks at the local co-op, or maybe they don't. So if you give them an assignment where they have to go get something from there, then that kind of like a 2-way win there. Now, I would caution, when we do have the students do stuff at home, we try to make it be things that are easily obtainable and super cheap, right? We don't want things to get expensive for them to have to do. I don't know if that answered your question or not. Okay. Other questions or thoughts or ideas that you've seen work? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and keep going. You guys are exhausted in the semester. I get it. Or you're just sitting on the edge of your seat, just wondering what I'm going to say next. Didn't mean to do that one. Let me click over here. Okay, so the next thing that's really important is connecting with students. And this is maybe the most important thing we can do, even though we think, you know, our agronomy topics are important, but really I think helping students learn the soft skills, right? How to problem solve, communicate. I think in some ways COVID is helping us do that better because we're demonstrating for our students how to problem solve on the fly, yet super uncomfortable for us all. But we're also demonstrating for our students how to be okay with the uncomfortableness and how to navigate through that. So I think as much as we can just be open with the students and sharing, you know, whoops, that didn't work. Sorry about that, guys. We'll try it this way instead. You know, I think that's really beneficial. So in that way, we're coaching them through uncertainties or teach them how to be okay and to be outside of their comfort zone, which at least for me in conversations I have with industry, say those are really important skills our students should have. And we are not graduating students with those skills. They're telling me that they know the technical skills really well, but they don't know how to do teamwork, problem solve, that kind of thing. So this is a picture of a faculty member. He was a department head, one of the folks that hired me when I was at Ohio State. And he went online this semester. He was kind of in the same boat you guys were. He was already using Canvas and some other tools like that. But all of a sudden, he wanted to do live interaction still with his students. He had a class of about 60 students. So he was learning how to do Zoom. He had done a lot of conference calls this way, but not teaching with it. So I'm practicing with him. And this just cracks me up, right? Because several times when we would meet, this would be his view. And the reason why it cracked me up is it reminded me of this. So if you ever watched, you know, I forget the name of the show, but with Tim Allen and with his neighbor, and you never saw the neighbor's whole face. And then I found this picture where, you know, the neighbor Wilson has the mask on, so very appropriate for COVID. But what was really happening there, right? There was some mentoring going on between those guys. And so, and you never know who your students are, especially if you go truly online, like beyond this, you know, maybe after all the COVID stuff settles down in a year or two, we have students back to campus like normal. I think we're going to find that when we're offering stuff online, we're actually going to open up the door for other students who never were coming to campus to begin with. And one of those examples is this guy, Bob Noonan, who, if you remember right, he was one of the instructors at the community college that I worked with. So he was one of my former students who did his degree online. And so what I'm trying to say is your true distance students end up being your colleagues too. Okay, so how do we engage with students? Okay, here's a couple of things, 3 things that I've done. So the very first week, so I'm thinking, okay, what if nobody can come to campus at all this fall? What are you going to do? You had the benefit this last semester, we already knew the students before they all got shipped home. But how are you going to connect with them when you've not seen them before? So what I do is my very first week, to get them used to all the technology, one of the assignments is to introduce themselves. And we have to tell them, you know, it's graded, otherwise they won't necessarily do that. And we also found that we have to tell them to post a picture of themselves. Otherwise, we were getting pictures of combines and tractors. so sometimes you have to be kind of explicit, you know. And then this way, it helps you get to know who the students are. You know, many of them are already farming in our case. So it kind of gives you an idea of what they are. The other thing I found in the end that worked better too is I actually met with every single student for 15 minutes within the first 3 weeks of class. Boy, it was I had 40 students. So it was a load. I'm not sure what you would do if you had 120. I think you could break it and maybe meet with 4 students at a time. That would be okay too. But it really breaks that barrier. It helps them see more real, you're more real. You can see where they're struggling early on. If they're not able to find things, they can't get Zoom to work or whatever it is. And that paid off dividends in the end. So something like that is good. The other thing is just continually be sending announcements out to them at least once a week, connecting with them, bringing them into, hey, I had this great question that somebody asked, let me share it with all of you. You know, just even though it's not synchronous, it's still keeping them engaged. So those kind of things help. All right, I saw chat. Let me see what we have here. Home improvement, yes, thanks, Matt. That was the name of the show. Okay, so let me pause again. Thoughts you guys have on how to connect with students? Is that something you're struggling with? Something that maybe you found that was working well? Again, with the large classes, I'm still kind of struggling a little bit how to do that. Reality, though, is when we're on campus, we're probably not connecting well with all of them anyway. But I'm wondering if, breaking them into groups, and even I don't know how much, latitude you have, but, do you have to meet with the whole class live each session, or do you maybe break them into groups of, 2 or 3 groups, and then that way you can interact with them a little better? I've used discussion boards. Some folks have great luck with it. My students tend to be more introvert and to the point, so there really wasn't a lot of good discussion other than a lot of Me Too kind of stuff. Steve, beyond the 15-minute conversation, how do you keep this up through the semester without spending 10 hours a week? Yeah, that's a really good point. Okay, so after I did the initial 15-minute segments, it's not like the students were needing a lot of my time, but what did help is they would start emailing me more when they had questions, right? So they were engaging. And during my classes, I got to where I was flipping the classroom. So they were doing the more lecture reading kind of stuff on their own. And then our live class session was going through homework, doing group work, that kind of thing. So they were still seeing me live 3 times a week. And then, during that time, then there was more engagement where they would be asking me questions. When I didn't do the conversations with them early on, they would just kind of sit out there and not really say much. So if that helps. So it didn't really add time on my plate beyond that. It was just initially.
Hi, this is Stephen.
Yeah.
Sorry, I can turn my video on if that's helpful. Then you can see I'm talking. I'm a real person.
Hey, Stephen.
Hi. So we had a practical course and we moved it online, and we moved to more assignments based, but then we had this weekly Zoom call for the whole class. So not individually, but we thought it might be a nice base for people to discuss general things and problems they were having and talk as a group, because they were working in pairs on this semester-long project. But what we found was almost nobody engaged with it. Maybe we had 1, maybe 2 students a week, but like I would say 80% of the class never logged in once to these Zoom calls. So it wasn't a requirement, it wasn't for credit or anything like that, but nobody took advantage of this chance just to chat with the professors. So do you have any ideas about how you could maybe promote engagement, or maybe offer something that they'd be interested in doing without being forced through extra credit?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And that's a struggle I've had too. So the first thing I always ask is that session really important for them to learn? So is there another way they can learn outside of that? And if there is, then I don't worry about it too much if they're not all there. Maybe they're kind of picking their own style and how they engage or not. But what I usually found is that those sessions are more valuable when the students realize. So I got to where I just required it of them, right? So I gave them, at least for the first couple of weeks, I would make that an assignment, be part of their points. And then usually after they had been to 1 or 2 sessions, then they saw the value of it. A lot of times the students just didn't realize how important it was, other than baiting them with grades. I'm not sure I have any other ideas yet.
This is Megan, following up on that. What strategies or experience have you had taking what's normally an in-person group project into an online environment?
I've had no problems.
Well,
yeah, no, let me think about it, because I've done stuff online for so long. Tell me, is there something you're wondering how it may work? Give me a little more of where you're thinking you got this.
Sorry, I keep turning on and off my video. So I have a lab class. In the lab, they typically do a group project. They always tell me they hate group projects. We talk about how to do group work. We spend a whole session discussing, how to make groups work. And then we have these iterative kind of assignments to move them along. And I guess these, if they're, I'm talking about designing a class online where they have never met each other, will never meet each other face to face. How do you build those groups? And it sounds like it's been fine.
It's been okay, right? I mean, okay, it's not perfect, right? It's the same problem with one person in a group doing more than everybody else. I love how you're walking them through how to work as groups. That was something I had thought of later that I don't do very well. And so that's super helpful. So, you know, you can, what I've done is like in the discussion board, I think you can do this in Canvas. I think it was Canvas, not D2L. So you can create like a discussion board just for that group. And so that way, that's a good place for them to kind of all be at, and you can introduce them to each other, you sign them into it. I would give them little assignments along the way. So like some of my groups would be doing a PowerPoint presentation, but they had to do some research first. So that was the first assignment, is give me what your topic is. And so they're getting feedback back and forth all the way. For them to give a presentation over Zoom, they did marvelously. They did far better than the faculty I was working with on that. Now we would do practice runs sometimes to make sure their technology was okay, you know, the connection was okay and all of that. But it seemed to be, the online group was and you still have challenges, but they weren't unique challenges, right? The normal kind of group challenge things like that. But they can give talks, right? So they can meet in Zoom and give their presentation, share their screen, just like we're doing. All of that is kind of cool. Did I answer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello, Deana.
Hi, Maria.
How are you? No, I just wanted to add that this is a small thing about connecting to students. I was thinking that, you know, in my case, when I open up to them, I tell them something personal. I feel that they tell me things that are personal, that they are emailing me things that are personal. They I don't know, or your opinions about topics, and then they find an image in Instagram and they send it to you. Or I have a student that shared a TED Talk with me now, you know, because he was interested, thought it was interesting, and it was related to East Africa. You know, I think that if you open to them, I think that helps a lot of students to open to you. Yeah. But you need to be first opening up and be more spontaneous, I think.
Yeah, no, that's really good.
It is hard when you are in a class. I mean, it took me, some students were laughing. It took me a while because you are in this classroom, you are there in the middle, right? You are there in the center. You are the one delivering, as you say, one way. And sometimes it takes a little bit to just break that and you know, go around. I brought some students to stage when we were in class, for example. That was fun. When students wanted to participate and they were like, hey, that was fun. So I think when you break that, that can be done online, and you say something personal to them, that helps them to connect with you, that you are a person like that. That's just my little experience of things that I'm, you know, a lot of students are emailing me now. Or when I send an announcement, I try to make it personal.
Yeah.
And if I have a problem, I actually end up telling them, you know, I'm struggling this week because of this reason. I found, should I do this or not? And I say, you know what, I'm going to tell them. You know, I'm sorry if I didn't answer to all your emails because of this reason. And I think they want to know that. I mean, I think that will work in the case.
That's really cool to hear. Yeah, I agree with that. That's kind of my personality and approach as well. You know, one thing I heard a lot this semester too, was when we had faculty going online that hadn't been online before, is they discovered that they actually had better engagement online. And, you know, I see that a lot. The introverts come alive, right? Because they're, I think, too shy, you know, so they'll chat in the chat box far more than when they were in the live classroom. So now sometimes you have to draw it out of them, right? You have to give them opportunity. When I was using Zoom, right, I give them a chance to draw on the whiteboard and share, and they figure out how to do things I don't even know how to do in there. But it's kind of like what you're saying, Maria, right? It's breaking that barrier. You're not just the expert, you're the coach, you're the mentor, you're helping them through that. Okay, and I saw a note, and I'm ignoring it, that Steve said we're running out of time. And if we need to do another session later, you guys, I'm totally open for that too, no problem. Okay, so let me go ahead and get to my next points real quick for you. Okay, so this one, yeah, okay, this is probably another really important one for you guys. What do you do when resources are tight? Okay, so multitask or multi-purpose it. This is my advice for that. So if you're not aware yet, there's kind of this notion of non-credit, workforce development, upskill kind of thing. So this idea that people need to come back to retool, upskills, okay, so improve their skills maybe to be able to do another task or something different within their company or their own business. Remember, a lot of people own their own businesses. So let me show a few things here. See if this will move forward. Okay, so even at, I don't mean like even at, but at Colorado State University, the horticulture folks have an agreement or an arrangement with a professional landscape company. So what they have done is spun off modules from their credit courses, which are available for non-credit, but you get like a badge or certificate if you complete that. Also, when I was at the University of Nebraska, we worked on spinning out, we broke our graduate level courses into 1 credit module sizes. Okay, so instead of taking a 3 credit plant breeding course through the whole semester, which you still could do if you were on campus, but online we broke that into 3 1 credit sections. So for a person who is a traditional online distance student, they're working full time, they tend to be older. We'll see after COVID if that really demographic holds true, but they like bite-sized stuff, right? And so they can do this for non-credit instead of for credit, right? So they get a certificate, but it's not the same as the academic one. So it's the same content, but we don't have the students do all the exams or the papers, but they kind of just get in there to get the core stuff. So I mentioned my students weren't actually watching my videos, which I was so sad. So what we did is we actually converted that text into ebooks, okay? And with an ebook, it was easier for me to edit too as time went on. I could also put in some interactive quizzing elements. I could put 2 or 3 minutes of clips where I'm demonstrating something, where it actually is better to have a video. So we put that into a package, and that's what my students would do then for their lecture part or the content part of the course. Well, now this last semester, what I was able to do is spin out pieces from that to package for an insurance and a banking industry who needed to learn a little bit about agriculture. And so you can take pieces of it, repackage it, and there you are, you can meet more than one audience at one time. So I think thinking along those lines, that will help you too, okay? So this is also a project at Nebraska where it's called the e-library, Plant and Soil Science e-library. When I was there, I was leading this effort. So we also had things where we would partner with a company. So this was an old example with Monsanto at the time. So they were coming out with a new product, and our extension folks were out there trying to tell people about how to be using refuges to kind of prevent resistance building up in their insect population. So with Monsanto, we developed this animation that kind of demonstrates the science behind it. So we would use it for our extension events, we would use it for our credit courses, and then Monsanto would take that same thing and use it for their internal training of their personnel. So that's kind of a good way to kind of, you know, meet needs that everybody has. This is the Plant Breeding Training Network. I put this up here because a couple of folks there at Colorado State were part of this as well. Same kind of idea where we were just kind of putting all of our resources together. Different people were developing different lessons. Some of the grad students were doing online webinars, but all of that was in one central location. And you could package it for part of a credit course, you could package it for a non-credit certificate, that kind of thing. This one is showing where we had a grant to actually demonstrate how to use a particular piece of equipment. So we used that at Ohio State as actually part of the online soil fertility course. It's also used as a recruitment kind of video now as well. Some of our e-lessons that we used at Nebraska, we translated in Spanish, right? So once you've got the bulk of the content together, you could repurpose it. And then over here, some of those lesson modules were actually part of a weed science class that Colorado State, New Mexico State, and Montana State jointly offered. So the idea is just to kind of think about maybe there's pieces that can be used in more than one place to really make better use of your time. And then I'm just going to mention, and when you have the opportunity, when you can, to partner with an educational researcher. So especially when you get with the grants, you've got some funding there. What those guys will do is they'll help you figure out what are the best practices, what are the students, you know, using best, where they're getting stuck, that kind of thing. Okay, so let me stop there. Final questions, other thoughts. We ended up with me doing a lot of talking, but I hope it was still useful for you. And again, this is recorded, so if it was kind of like drinking out of a fire hydrant, you can watch it again and pull out the pieces that really resonate with you.
Yeah, so I have one last question, Deana. How do you handle the silence during these Zoom talks when you can't hear all the applause and see all the smiles?
It's a little freaky, right? So yeah, it still kind of unnerves you a little bit. You know, when I'm teaching, what I'll actually do is call on people. And I'd be like, Rick, what do you think? You know, if it's kind of quiet out there. But yeah, I just didn't want to do that today. Maybe I should have.
All right. Well, thanks so much once again. We all really learned a lot, and yeah, look forward to learning more from you in the future.
All right. And you guys feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to answer questions, especially as you get catching your breath and you're diving into stuff, and you'll think of other questions along the way. Or I'm happy to share some of the materials or the class, you know, screenshots of things. Sometimes that helps to give you some ideas too. Yep.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, and have a great day.
You bet. Thanks, you guys.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.